I sold my books, risking my exams, only to buy her the pen she wanted. But when I gave it proudly, she smiled coldly, and said another man had already written her future. I still remember the weight of that fountain pen in my palm. $300. My entire textbook fund for finals week. But Sarah had been staring at it through the shop window for months, running her fingers along the glass whenever we walked past. It's the same model Maya Angelou used. She'd whisper, like it was a holy relic. I'd write my novel with something like that. So I sold everything. My chemistry textbooks, my calc books, even my laptop charger that I'd need for the final project. Posted desperate ads on Facebook Marketplace at midnight. Accepting lowball offers because time was running out. Her birthday was in 2 days. 3 years we'd been together. 3 years of me believing I was building something. Rue quoted poetry while doing dishes and left little notes in my backpack that said things like, proud of, and, or my favorite person. I thought the pen would be our forever moment. The morning of her birthday, I wrapped it in tissue paper I stole from the campus bookstore. My hands were shaking because I knew what this meant for my grades. But love makes, right? Sarah opened it sitting on her dorm bed. Sunlight streaming, blinds that never closed properly. I watched her face transform when she saw it. Her eyes went wide. Then something else flickered across her. My stomach dropped. Oh, wow, she said, but her voice was flat, dead. This is expensive, Jake. Love it, right? It's the one always. I can't accept this. The words hit me like I destroyed my semester for this moment. I'd already failed 2 practice exams because I couldn't afford the study guides. My professor had sent 3 emails asking where my project was. What do you mean can't accept it? Sarah, Jake, we need to talk. Those 4 words. The sentence of every relationship that ever mattered. She set the pen down on her nightstand like it was contaminated. Like my sacrifice meant nothing. There's someone else. I actually laughed. Because this had to be a joke. This had to be some twisted birthday surprise. Where and say, gotcha. And we'd laugh about it later. But she wasn't laughing. His name is Marcus. He's in my creative writing program. We've been together for 2 months. 2 months. While I was staying until 3 a.m. helping her edit essays. While I was bringing her coffee during her study sessions. While I was planning this expensive gesture that just cost me my entire future. He already bought me a pen, she continued, and her voice had this dreamy quality now, like she was talking about a prince from a fairy tale, a vintage Parker 51. He said it belonged to his grandmother, and that he wanted me to have it because I'm going to be a real writer someday. The room started spinning. Sarah, what about us? What about everything we, Jake, are sweet, but don't get it. Marcus understands my dreams. He's already published. He has connections. He sees my potential. And then she said the words that still wake me at 3 a.m. 2 years later. Has already written our future together. I stared at the pen I'd bought her. The pen that cost me my textbooks, my grades, my at graduating on time. It was still sitting there in its little box mocking me. So what was I asked, and my voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. What were we? Sarah looked at me with something that might have been pity. We're practice, Jake, we're safe. But Marcus is the real thing. I left the pen on her nightstand. Walked out of her dorm in a daze while she called after me. Saying something about staying friends. About how this didn't have to be weird. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about my chemistry final in 4 days. The one I couldn't study for because I'd sold my textbooks to buy love from someone who was already giving it away to someone else. I failed 3 classes that semester. Had to take out extra loans to retake them. Watched my GPA tank so hard that the graduate programs I'd dreamed of became impossible. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was logging onto Instagram 2 weeks later and seeing Sarah's story. She was at some poetry reading, smiling beside a guy with perfectly messy hair and thick, rimmed glasses. In her hand was a vintage fountain pen. The caption read, "When someone believes in dreams enough to share family treasures. For blessed fair real writer Faye Lovewins." That's when I learned the first rule of betrayal. The person who breaks will always find a way to make it look like a fairy tale. And I was just the villain they had to escape from to get there. The first month after Sarah destroyed me, I told I was handling it well. I wasn't. I started skipping classes I was already failing. What was the point? My GPA was already circling the drain, and every professor looked at me like I was wasting their time, which I was. My roommate Dave tried to help at first. Dude, need to get back out there. Sarah was anyway. But Dave didn't understand. This wasn't about getting over someone. This was about realizing that everything I thought I knew about was a lie. I'd always been the responsible one. The guy who planned ahead. Who saved money, who did the right thing. Sarah used to call me her steady rock. Turns out are just things people step on to reach higher ground. 2 months post, Sarah, I made my first real mistake. Her name was Jessica. Blonde, bubbly, worked at the campus coffee shop, where I'd been spending way too much time scrolling through Sarah's social media. Jessica had this way of laughing at everything I said, even when I wasn't trying to be funny. Or so different from the usual college guys. She told me one afternoon. Actually listen. That should have been a red flag. But I was drowning, and Jessica felt like a preserver. We started out. She'd bring me free coffee, stay late to walk me back to my dorm. She told me about her psychology major, her plans to become a therapist, how she wanted to help broken people heal. Or not broken. She'd say when I told her about Sarah. Or just learning what deserve. For 3 weeks I felt human again. Jessica would text me good morning. She'd save me the corner booth at the coffee shop. She'd run her fingers through my hair while I studied for my makeup exams. I thought maybe Sarah had done me a favor. Maybe this was what real affection looked like. Then was walking past the library when I heard Sarah's laugh. That same musical giggle she used to save for me. I looked, and there she was with Marcus, spread out on a blanket of the oak tree where we used to study. But they weren't alone. Jessica was sitting with them. All 3 of them laughing like old friends. My went cold. I hid behind a tree and watched his liver to Sarah. Whispering something that made Sarah cover her mouth and giggle. Marcus was nodding along, like he was in on some private joke. That's when Jessica pulled out her phone and showed them something. Sarah squealed with delight. Marcus high-fived Jessica. They were looking at pictures of me. I stood there for 20 minutes, watching the 3 of them bond over my humiliation. Watching Jessica sweet, caring Jessica who said I deserved better. Trade stories about the pathetic guy, who bought his ex a fountain pen with his textbook money. The betrayal hit different this time. Sarah's betrayal had been brutal but honest. She'd found someone better and moved on. Cold, but at least real. But Jessica's betrayal was worse. It was calculated, performed. She'd been studying me like a psychology experiment, reporting back to Sarah and Marcus about how I was handling the breakup. I was entertainment. When I confronted Jessica the next day, she didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Jake, or being paranoid. We're friends. Sarah and I were friends before 2 even broke lies. All lies. I'd never once heard Sarah mention Jessica's name. Reporting back to them about me. Jessica's face shifted. For just a second, I saw something calculating flicker in her eyes. Then she put on that same sweet smile she'd been wearing for weeks. Being crazy Jake. Maybe should talk to someone about these trust issues. Trust issues. Like I was the problem. Like my paranoia wasn't perfectly justified. I stopped going to the coffee shop, started avoiding Jessica, Sarah, the whole campus if I could manage it. But the damage was done. Word spreads fast in a small college town. By the end of the semester, I could feel people whispering when I walked past. I'd catch fragments of conversations. The guy who sold his textbooks. Totally obsessed with X. Kinda pathetic honestly. My friends started treating me different. Dave would change the subject when I walked into our room. My study group found reasons to meet without me. Even my lab partner requested a transfer. I'd become that guy. The cautionary tale other students told to make themselves feel better about their own relationship drama. But the worst part wasn't the whispers or the isolation. The worst part was realizing that Sarah and Marcus and Jessica weren't evil masterminds. They were just regular people who'd found something amusing about my pain, and decided to bond over it. I wasn't important enough to. I was just important enough to laugh at. That's when I understood the second rule of betrayal. The people who destroy won't lose sleep over it. They'll turn it into content for their group chat, and move on with their lives. Meanwhile, are left rebuilding from the fragments of who used to be. Wondering if I'll ever stop being the punchline to someone else's story. 2 years later, I'm writing this from my childhood bedroom at 3 a.m., unemployed, watching my former classmates post LinkedIn updates about their dream jobs while I refresh Indeed for the 100th time today. That fountain pen destroyed everything. Not just my grades, though those never recovered. I graduated 2 years late with a 2.1 GPA. The graduate programs I dreamed of wouldn't even look at my applications. The internships I'd planned on, they went to students who hadn't sold their textbooks for love. But the real damage went deeper. I stopped trusting my own judgment. Every decision became a second guess. Every relationship became an assessment. When someone showed interest, I'd analyze it to, looking for the angle, the hidden motive, the moment they'd reveal I was just practice for someone better. My family noticed first. Used to be so confident. My mom said last Christmas when I came home alone again, "What happened to the Jake who had 5-year plans?" What happened was I learned that 5-year plans are just fantasies when someone can destroy entire foundation with 4 words. There's someone else. But here's what nobody tells about betrayal: it doesn't just change how see other people. It changes how see. I started making terrible choices. Senior year, I cheated on my makeup chemistry exam. Got caught. Academic probation. The professor looked at me with genuine disappointment and said, "I expected better from Jake." I wanted to laugh. Everyone expected better from me. That was the problem. I kept trying to be the good guy in a world where good guys finish last. Watching from the sidelines while smooth talking poets steal their girlfriends. After graduation, I bounced between dead-end jobs. Retail, food service, temp work. Nothing that used my degree. Nothing that mattered. I'd watch my coworkers and wonder if they knew they were working alongside someone who'd once had potential. The isolation got worse. Dave got engaged to his college girlfriend. Moved to Seattle for some tech job. Our last conversation was him trying to invite me to the wedding. Both of us knowing I wouldn't come. "Can't let Sarah control forever, man," he said. But he didn't understand. This wasn't about Sarah anymore. This was about learning that I was the kind of person who'd sacrifice everything for someone who'd already moved on. This was about realizing I was fundamentally naive in a world that punished naivety. 6 months ago, I saw Sarah's engagement announcement on Facebook. Marcus proposed at a poetry reading. The ring was vintage. Just like the pen. The comments were full of people calling it meant to be, and relationship goals. Sarah looked radiant. Happy. Like she'd never spent 3 years with someone who loved her enough to destroy his own future. The post had 847 likes. I was probably the only person who saw it and felt sick, but that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was seeing Jessica in the comments. Heart eyes emoji and "SOA peep y for buoch." Like she'd been rooting for them all along. Like she hadn't spent weeks pretending to care about my feelings, while collecting intelligence for their amusement. That night, I drove past the coffee shop where Jessica used to work. New staff, different energy. Like my entire college experience had been erased and replaced with something shinier. I parked outside Sarah's old dorm and just sat there for an hour. Trying to remember what it felt like to believe in forever. Trying to remember the version of who thought love was about grand gestures and sacrifice. That Jake feels like a stranger now. The final rule of betrayal hit me sitting in that parking lot. The person, where before it happened, dies with the relationship. Don't get to go back. Don't get to unknow what learned. Just get to carry the knowledge that capable of being disposable. I'm 25 now. Most of my friends are married, buying houses, posting pictures of their kids. I'm still living with my parents, working retail, and flinching every time someone shows genuine interest in me. Last week a girl at work asked me out. Sweet, funny, reminded me a little of who Sarah used to be before I knew her real name was Practice. I said no automatically, and when she asked why, I couldn't explain without sounding insane. How to tell someone can't trust love, because learned that 3 years of I love can be erased by 2 months of someone better. How to explain that grand gestures are just expensive ways to discover never mattered. My therapist says I need to forgive. Says I was young and made a mistake. Says Sarah's betrayal says more about her than it does about me. But therapists get paid to find hope in people. The truth is simpler and uglier. I invested everything in someone who was shopping around for better options. I mistook being needed for being wanted. I confused gratitude for love, and now I know that the most dangerous phrase in the English language in I love poem. It's, I thought we're different. Because when someone says that, what they really mean is, I thought be easier to keep around while I figured out what I actually wanted. So here I am at 3 a.m., unemployed and alone. Writing a warning that nobody will listen to. Because everyone thinks their love story is different. But if we're reading this because they're thinking about selling textbooks to buy someone a gift they've been wanting. Let me save the trouble. The pen won't make them stay. But it will definitely help them write someone else's love story. And I'll spend the rest of wondering if the person sacrificed everything forever thinks about the fool who loved them enough to risk his future for their smile.